Hi, this video will attempt to explain the complexity of Georgia's two occupied regions. Obviously, this is a very political and sensitive topic, so we will attempt to portray the situation in a nuanced and balanced manner. Currently, both Abkhazia and South Ossetia are considered to be a part of Georgia, but they consider themselves to be independent countries, but are actually fully funded and protected by Russia. Only Russia, Venezuela, Syria, Nicaragua, and Nauru recognize these two countries' independence from Georgia. Despite global support overwhelmingly favoring Georgia, the Georgian government lacks formal control over the regions. Additionally, despite these regions claiming to be independent countries, around 90% of Abkhazian and South Ossetian citizens have Russian passports and receive pensions from Russia. Approximately 70% of each region's governmental budget comes from the Russian government, and all security is provided by Russia. It's a common misconception that Georgia is an innately violent part of the world. In fact, in the late 1800s, the Georgians, along with their Abkhazian and South Ossetian neighbors, lived in agrarian societies without a strong notion of us versus them. The roots of these conflicts as we know them today began before the creation of the Soviet Union in 1922. There are three major factors which led to the breakdown of relations between the Georgians, Abkhaz, and South Ossetians. The first is the creation of Georgian nationalism spearheaded by Georgian author and poet Ilya Chavchavadze. The second was a political disorganization on behalf of the Abkhaz and South Ossetian governments, and the third was Bolshevik propaganda and interference within the region. In Georgia, the process of introducing nationalism into the Georgian population was done mostly by Georgian author and academician Ilya Chavchavadze, who lived between 1837 and 1907. Chavchavadze had spent much time studying the independence movements of the Irish from Great Britain, the Hungarians from the Habsburg Empire, and the Italian revolutionary movement led by Giuseppe Garibaldi. When he returned to Georgia in 1861, he used his observations to attempt to create a similar nation-building movement in his homeland. This process was done through alphabetic reforms to combat illiteracy and the introduction of newspapers and periodicals for the common citizen. Doing this made it easy for citizens from any part of Georgia to read about news from anywhere in the country, making them feel as if a riot in a far-off town was still local news. Finally, he created the first national museum in Georgia. By doing this, Chavchavadze allowed people from all around Georgia to begin developing the notion of the Georgian people, since they were able to see the continuity of Georgian history along with the localness of this history. This factor was important because it gave Georgia's minorities, in this case the Abkhaz and South Ossetians, concerned that the Georgians would attempt to commit acts of ethnic cleansing in the same way that the Russian Empire was actively doing in the North Caucasus to the Circassians, who are a close ethnic relative to the Abkhaz. The rise in Georgian nationalism also led Georgians to view their Abkhaz and South Ossetian neighbors as visitors or guests in an otherwise Georgian homeland. The incoherent and inconsistent policies of the Abkhaz and South Ossetian governments made constructive work with the Georgians nearly impossible. After the Democratic Republic of Georgia was established on the 26th of May 1918, the governments of Abkhazia and South Ossetia were torn between being independent countries or unifying with their ethnic cousins in Russia. Up to this time, South Ossetia had never existed with official boundaries in Georgia. This, combined with the existence of North Ossetia and the then Russian Empire, made South Ossetian claims to independence tenuous. Despite South Ossetia's frequent demands for independence between 1917 and 1918, the South Ossetian government decided to petition the Georgian government for the creation of a single administrative region of both North Ossetia, now in Russia, and South Ossetia, with Skhinvali serving as the capital. A similar story unfolded in Abkhazia. By February of 1918, the Abkhazians had already viewed themselves as an independent political entity that only had neighborly relations with Georgia. Despite this, leaders of the Democratic Republic of Georgia had managed to reach an agreement with the Abkhazian government that would have seen renewed political talks between the two peoples following the elections of an Abkhazian government and, in return, the Georgians would recognize a united, undivided Abkhazia. The third and final factor was propaganda and influence from the Bolsheviks. Just 5 days following the Abkhaz-Georgian agreement, a Bolshevik rebellion was launched in Abkhazia, which ended when Georgian General Georgy Mazniashvili declared himself the Governor-General of Abkhazia. After this, Mazniashvili managed to push his troops all the way to Sochi, Russia. Mazniashvili's actions had solidified the end of relations between the Abkhaz and the Georgians. In March of 1918, Ossetian Bolshevik party leaders insisted that authorities had betrayed the peasantry by allowing landowners to retain their lands. In this case, the peasantry was the South Ossetians and the landowners were Georgians. Bolsheviks, both in Abkhazia and South Ossetia and from Russia, had frequently painted Georgians as an imperialistic bourgeoisie, which helped fuel ethnic tensions and created a desire for independence from Georgia. In September 1920, at a conference in Baku, Azerbaijan, Bolshevik speakers claimed that Georgians were destroying and exterminating villages in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. What was left out of the conference, however, was that it was the Bolsheviks who caused the violence just 11 months earlier. In fact, the Bolshevik Caucasian Regional Committee, which was controlled by Moscow, canceled an uprising after the Georgians discovered the plans. However, the Georgians weren't aware of this cancellation and attacked the rebels and arrested around 300 people. This event is what finally ended relations between South Ossetia and Georgia. During the Soviet era, Abkhazia remained a public within the Georgian Soviet Socialist Republic, similar to Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland in the United Kingdom, while South Ossetia only managed to obtain periodic republic status, similar to a U.S. state. Georgia's experience in the USSR is similar to other former Soviet countries. When the Soviet Union was created in 1922, it paused the political events of that time while ethnic problems only worsened. When the USSR collapsed in 1991, the political situation was unpaused, so to speak, and the conflicts prior to the creation of the Soviet Union carried out during the 1990s. In Georgia, there was a 15-day civil war over who was to become the country's new president. Georgia's first president, Zviad Gamsakhourdia, used Georgian nationalism as a means to solidify his role. For example, he called South Ossetians guests who should return to North Ossetia if they wanted to have a homeland. Gamsakhourdia was forced to flee Georgia in December of 1991. In 1992 until 1993, there was a brief civil war between Abkhazian secessionist forces and Georgian forces, resulting in Abkhazia breaking away from Georgia's control. At this time, South Ossetia also claimed independence from Georgia. Additionally, in 1992, Russian-led peacekeepers and an OSCE force began monitoring both regions. By 2002, more than half of all Abkhazians had Russian passports. In 2003, Mikhail Saakashvili came to power during the Rose Revolution. Saakashvili was avidly pro-NATO, pro-EU, and anti-Russia. Saakashvili ended much of the corruption in Georgia's Achara Autonomous Republic in 2004, which had also threatened to break away from Georgia. Following this, he wished to do the same in South Ossetia. Later, in 2004, he closed the Igneti market, a large bazaar in Skhinvali, which resulted in large riots and the near-complete destruction of trust between South Ossetia and Georgia. In August of 2008, Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili once again used crime as a pretext for entering Skhinvali and to regain control of South Ossetia. The response from Russia, which claimed to be the official peacekeeper of the region along with claiming to protect their nationals since around 90% of South Ossetians have Russian passports, was a complete naval blockade of Georgia in the Black Sea, the destruction of Georgia's entire navy in the city of Poti, the bombing of the city of Gori, and the ethnic cleansing of Georgian villages within South Ossetia and airstrikes on radar stations around Tbilisi. Following the 2008 war, Russia formally acknowledged the independence of both Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Since then, all effective control of the regions is conducted by Russia. The current situation along the de facto border of South Ossetia is particularly bad, with a large number of Georgian citizens being detained by Russian peacekeepers under the pretense of illegal border crossings. There are frequent reports of fence building and trench work being conducted along the de facto border. So-called arrests of Georgian nationals along the borders of the two regions are common, with 92 Georgians having been detained for crossing the border in South Ossetia and 25 to Abkhazia in 2018 alone. Both activities conducted by the de facto governments make normalizing relations with Georgia nearly impossible, while simultaneously inhibiting their own citizens from accessing goods and services in Georgia. The worst result from these conflicts, and the frozen status of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, is the humanitarian crisis created by the need to assist over 100,000 IDPs. Most of these people are living in temporary camps turned permanent villages throughout the Georgian countryside, particularly in the regions of Samogrelo, Skhytantianati, and Chita-Kartli. The ability for these individuals to return to their homes in Abkhazia and South Ossetia is nearly impossible due to continued borderization, or the construction of border infrastructure conducted by the de facto governments, along with the assistance of the Russian military. Economic losses for Abkhazia alone are estimated to be above $10 billion, with negligible improvement or growth over the past years. South Ossetia's situation is estimated to be even worse. The big question is how long are the Abkhazian and South Ossetian people willing to wait for prosperity? Currently, most people living there receive Russian pensions and are dependent on Russian tourists or revenue from Russian military bases for economic activity. Abkhazia's ability to gain a semblance of true independence is greater than South Ossetia's, thanks to Abkhazia's geography. The region is well known for its beaches and tea and citrus plantations, giving it some economic potential. South Ossetia, however, is completely mountainous except for its capital city of Tskhinvali. The region lacks a public airport and is only accessible by a single road to Russia, making it almost completely isolated from the rest of the world. Despite trust between Abkhazians and South Ossetians and the Georgian government being almost completely non-existent, the poor economic state of the two regions may one day force them to reconcile with Georgia. For more information about Georgia's occupied regions, or Georgia as a whole, visit our website at www.visiting-georgia.com. Thank you for watching.